Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's seminar. Thanks for joining us. I've just been looking down the chat about where you're all tuning in from today, so a very warm welcome. Feel free to carry on with that chat, make new connections with people, and just engage and meet new delegates as we go along through the day. I'm going to be introducing our session shortly with all of our speakers, but I just wanted to let you know that we're recording this session today. This is part one of our seminar series with Workday. So we'll send some more information in the chat and you can sign up to part two as well. And all of our other seminars that are available, they're all free to you. So please check out that link and make sure you signed up for the rest of them. So if you enjoyed today's seminar and you want to watch again or you want to share with your colleagues, don't worry because we're recording it and we'll send that out to you as well. So without further ado, we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So please make sure that you submit your questions into the Q&A for our panel today. Get them in nice and early, don't leave it too late so we don't run out of time. And I will get through as many as possible. So we're going to be talking today about high performing procurement, and part one of that series, like I said, is building a resilient and sustainable ESG strategy. And we've got some great speakers that are going to impart some of their knowledge and experience with you. So I'm going to introduce Chris Lang to join me now from Workday. So this, like I said, this seminar series is kindly sponsored by Workday, and I'm just going to invite Chris along. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for supporting these seminars for us. So tell us a bit about you and your role at Workday.
Hi, good afternoon, Emma. Thanks for having me. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody that's joining. My name's and I lead supplier programs at Workday. So this is a function that falls within Workday's global procurement office. So I'm not in sales. And I joined Workday about 2 years ago. My team's responsible for a lot of the supplier management activities for procurement. This really covers compliance, risk, supplier diversity, sustainability, as some other corporate strategic initiatives. I've been in industry. I was counting last night and started feeling old. I've been in industry for about 30 years, and I kind of chunked that up in about 10 years. I really started in sourcing, supply chain. My colleagues told me I went to the dark side. I did system implementations for about 10 years. And then I went back to supply chain and really started focusing on, programs and strategic initiatives. And so that's kind of taken me to Workday and where I'm at right now.
Excellent. Well, sustainability it's never been hotter as a topic. It's a bit of the elephant in the room right now for procurement professionals, and it can be quite daunting about knowing where to start. Really, it's quite a beast to tackle. What are some of the priority areas your team at Workday is currently focusing on?
Yeah, definitely the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So, I think we're really seeing across all the industries that this momentum has been building for a number of years, and it's been really crucial for companies to link their operations and performance to environmental, social, and governance ratings. With that, we've been pretty programmatic in our approach. I think since I've joined, we've really focused on trying to ensure our programs are in for the long haul, and that they're sustainable, they're resilient, and really that they have legs to it. For the beginning and the inception of our programs, we've really focused on aligning and prioritizing, and they ensuring that they align with our overall kind of corporate messaging around ESG initiatives, tied in with our corporate policies. And even we're a little unique as well, we have our customers as well, so we do have influencing factors coming in from customer request as well as requirements they're also trying to incorporate into their agreements with Workday. So behind the scenes, we really focused on building strong partnerships with our internal organizations, that we're aligned with our environmental and sustainability team, our internal belonging and diversity teams, And then as we look at, all of the compliance areas that we need to do around corporate social justice, security and risk, we partner with those teams. And then we kind of circle around with our sources as well, because they're the ones that really manage the relationships with the key stakeholders, decision makers in the business. Sorry, I'm showing internet was a little unstable, so let me know if I'm dropping in or out.
It was a little jumpy, but I think we got that, so don't worry about that. That is the toils of working all remotely, I'm afraid. So how are Workday solutions helping your team and programs with some of these issues then? What are some of the things you're working on?
Yeah, I think one of the unique thing, well, maybe not a unique thing, we use a lot of the same solutions that, our customers are using. And so, as I look at the solutions and what they're providing for our programs, I think centralized data is really a key part, and that's really giving us a lot of insight. For strategic sourcing teams, a lot of the activities that they do around, the RFPs, we use various forms as part of, the RFPs to collect information, use that for evaluations. We also use those forms to, trigger events and milestones as far as, when we're bringing a vendor into our portfolio. And, that could be anything from, our security, our privacy. Our forms are also, an attestation to our code of conduct. So, it kind of joins the commercial pieces as well as, some of the other, environmental and sustainability initiatives that we have. And we really use that data to not only, ensure who we're bringing in, where they stand, but also that's part of some of our ongoing monitoring activities. So as we take a look at those data elements that we collect, we do have, I'll just say kind of periodic monitoring. So we'll do compliance checks and things. Are they still, compliance around, anti-bribery activities, as well as we start doing follow-ups around, our supplier diversity goals and things like that. I think the other piece too is our platform with these forms, it allows us to operationalize things. So it gives us a little more agility that we can take these forms and run them through the various teams that need to do reviews or do approvals, or we need to, address if there's something out of the norm. So, it allows us to really make these activities part of, our day-to-day work. So.
Excellent. Well, great. Thanks very much. Right, at this point, I'm going to introduce our panel. So Chris, stay with us. Hopefully your internet connection stays with us too. And I'll invite our other panelists. So joining us today, we've got David Lowsby, who's MD of Barker's Commercial Services. Welcome, David. And Sebastian Balls, who's Head of Global Procurement at UCB. And Sebastian is also on our procurement power list this year. So welcome, both of you. Thanks for joining us. So, Sebastian, tell us a little bit about you and your role at UCB.
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this panel. And again, I think for me, the reason I'm so happy to be here today is because sustainability is a topic which is really core to my heart. So hopefully during some of the conversations today, I can really inspire some of my fellow procurement colleagues to really embark on this journey or to continue pursuing this journey that we have around sustainability. And I would even challenge us at a certain point to go even further. So I work for a company, UCB. We are a biopharmaceutical company based in Brussels. And as you've introduced, Emma, I have the pleasure of working with a great group of colleagues and basically act as their sounding board as head of procurement for the team. So looking forward to this conversation with our fellow colleagues.
Thanks, Sebastian. David, tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm, as I said, probably I would describe myself as a bit of a pracademic, so somebody that spans the area between practitioner and academic. So my work spans into the academic space as well as the practitioner space. One of the specialisms that I've developed over the years is for ESG, so environmental sustainability and governance, and currently advising quite a number of organizations in terms of their ESG journey. And so therefore, for me, this topic is incredibly relevant.
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. David, I'm going to ask you a question first, so stay with me there. So sustainability, like we said, is high on everyone's agenda. But what is the corporate commitment appetite like, do you think? How easy is it to sell in the commitment and get the resource in place to get these projects off the ground?
I think the commitment at what I would call an at principle level is very, very high. I think the issues for me are often centered around, for many people and many organizations, where to start. Where do I actually start? Because it is such a big area. I think it starts to phase people, if I'm being perfectly honest. And that's therefore one of the things that people stumble on initially. So my advice to most people is make a start, just make a start and get going. And what invariably what people do is they learn a lot of stuff along the way. And as a consequence, I think, you talked about the resource for getting this off the ground. I mean, as you know, I've always been a great advocate for procurement being the sort of the facilitator, the propagator, the catalyst for this happening within our organizations. And I guess given our pivotal position across the organization to understand and engage with all the functions across the business, then what better place to sort of be positioned to make these kind of things happen. And so for me, this whole boundary spanning role that I describe it as working across the organization and making sense of it and translating it for different parts of the organization is really one of the primary functions of procurement and supply chain professionals. And I think that, I see it as a huge area of growth and potential for the profession going forward. And so from my point of view, hugely important that we seize that opportunity and treat it as an opportunity as opposed to a challenge or a risk, but actually see it as being something incredibly positive. Then I think we can be hugely influential, but also act as the trusted advisor across the organization to help them navigate their way through this. And so I think we have a very positive role to play here.
Sebastian, I mean, what's the appetite and the commitment like from the top, from you? And does the organization really see that this sits firmly in procurement space? Are you getting the support from the corporate board that you need as a team?
No, I think it's fair to say that over the past couple of years, we've seen a great evolution of a topic which was probably tackled by more in an altruistic way by certain boards and executive committees at different companies. But I think thanks to external pressures and also internal fighters for this important topic, I think we have clearly seen a change over the past couple of years, and it has been small in certain instances. For us, it has been rather big. I mean, we've really established a function around sustainability in the broader sense of it, because I think we talk a bit about sustainability. We often associate it with the green aspect, but it's also a much larger topic. So how do we create impact on the environment as well as on the communities in which we operate? And I think that's a very important topic. And if you take it from that point of view, it even solidifies the role that procurement can play in that. Because if you think about it, the decisions that we make as an organization on how to allocate our resources, so translating it in how do we spend our money, those decisions will actually decide our tomorrow, and they will decide where we are going to create impact. So from a procurement point of view, we can be hugely influential into that, because we are that connection between our organization and the outside world. And so we can either be passive about that, and then we will have to depend on how quickly as an organization we make that evolution. Or again, procurement can take a leader role in bringing the right suppliers in or connecting the problems to the right suppliers out there who do make an impact on the community or the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, is this something that you're seeing, that there is a real mandate from the top to say that this is something that everyone should be focusing on, and is that firmly sitting with procurement?
Yeah, as far as our corporate appetite, it's pretty strong. I think that's really driven through, our kind of corporate DNA. our co-founders, Neil and Dave Duffield, they really set the tone. And, with Anil and our other co-CEO, Chano, they've worked with our leaders, and it's really integrated into, our corporate messaging. So there is a point in direction that, a lot of the various ESG initiatives, you hear them talking about it and, bring it to the forefront. And, that makes it a lot easier to, to navigate and get the programs rolled out. And, I think, as my colleagues have mentioned, procurement is really positioned in a great place. We're really helping to influence the suppliers we bring into the mix, what types of activities and standards that we want to drive. And so with that partnership with, our internal business stakeholders and folks that are driving those particular programs, it puts us, at the right place to be able to help influence and get that delivered.
Yeah, I mean, Sebastian, you mentioned then it's such a big topic, a broad topic, and it's not just about the environmental stuff. How do you know where to start? It is really big, and how, are you focusing on both short and long term plans and goals?
I think David alluded already to it in his introduction. I think the most important thing is to get going.
Yeah.
It is a huge elephant out there, and you can approach it from different things. But what you need to do is you need to put a stick in the ground. And one of the things that I have seen fail in the past is basically when we try to address all the different topics. So when we try to, at the same time, drive diversity in our supply base, try to achieve science-based targets, try to work with responsible suppliers, all these types of things. If we try to make the program too broad, first of all, we lose connection as to where we are going. And secondly, we just lose traction because it's too complex and the progress we're not making tangible. And so I think what you need to do is you need to pick one or two topics first and actually show that you can improve it. And then once you have gained traction, you also gain credibility within the organization, and you also create a followership to actually start moving the needle. And I think that this is what you need to do. You need to plot for the short term, but then again, and I think this is important, you need to have a long-term ambition. If you don't know where you want to be in, let's say, 10 years from now, even, or 5 years from now, if you don't have a bold goal, you're actually moving the needle too slowly.
Yeah.
So I think you need, at the same time, you need to be bold, and it should be as bold that people might think, I don't have a clue on how we will be able to achieve it. It's okay to be that bold, but as long that you start making small steps towards that goal and start tracking your progress to it, I think you can make a difference.
Excellent. David, your thoughts there?
No, I think Sebastian is absolutely spot on, and I think for me, using the analogy that it's a huge elephant, it clearly is, but like all big things, you have to break them down into much smaller components to be able to manage them. And often or not, I actually advise people to think about things like governance, oddly enough, first, simply because thinking about the governance as to, who's responsible, who's accountable, who do you need to consult, who needs to get informed, and you just start to break it down layer by layer by layer in terms of all the different things that you might have in terms of a sustainability policy, an environmental policy, a mobility policy, not a fleet policy, but a mobility policy. You start to then think about natural resources and sources, modern day slavery, so you start to just break it all down and just go, right, okay, right, I can start to see this is, I can start to visualize it. I can see an architecture. Okay, then, so I've got links then between my energy and carbon policy and my mobility policy, because that influences that, and then my waste management and packaging policy, right, that connects with sustainability. So you start to sort of visualize it and draw a map. You can start to then, understand then, back to Sebastian's point, how you can then start to sort of break these things down and then focus on, it's like the classic, focus on a few things and do them really well, then move on to the next ones. But set the expectation in the organization to say, this is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do. This is what it looks like. This is the program. It may change based upon what we learn upon the journey, but guess what? People will embrace that, because there's a huge amount of authenticity then about the fact that you're committed to the journey, you're prepared to listen and learn, you're prepared to engage with the supply chain as a whole, you're prepared to engage with your internal stakeholders. Becomes hugely empowering. And like most people will say to you, that if they're involved and engaged with something, the chances are they will then start to take ownership then for what needs to be done. And by doing that, then you develop this momentum then that can then move through an organization, and becomes hugely powerful. But I think, to Sebastian's point, don't be afraid of actually sort of, setting the bar high, because I think people want to see something that is demonstrably different. And I'd almost argue that most people who understand, or at least passionate about this subject, don't want the sort of the small tweak of the dial. They actually want to see something substantive happen. That's the expectation. So don't disappoint, is what I'm saying. Is shoot for it and go for it. And I think that by setting it out, and often or not, many people will understand this subject different ways. So be prepared to deliver it visually, deliver it through verbal presentations, do it through sort of written communication. All the different ways are hugely, hugely empowering, so that people can get that message and begin to understand, what it is that you're trying to achieve. But I think, for me, this just, it's like the 17, sustainable development goals. I say to most people, don't try and do all 17 all at once, because you'll fail. Start with 4, the 4 that are really, really relevant to your business. So if you're in land and property, then think about, what it is about the built environment, whatever, just make it manageable, because if you try and put your arms around everything all at once, you're sure you're not going to achieve it. And so I think it is about it's like a major program management job. You've just got to break it down into its elements, because if you don't, you'll never be successful.
No, and you're right, it is an elephant. And someone always used to say to me about a big project that was like an elephant: pick a leg and take a bite. Start somewhere. You've got to start somewhere. Don't try and boil the ocean. Chris, in terms of long and short term planning, and I guess the guys here have already kind of made that point, that people want to see that you're making a start, and making some progress. And I think that's really important for like attracting new talent, or these issues are important to employees, to stakeholders, to customers. Have you addressed both short and long-term goals?
Yeah, while Sebastian was speaking, I was just nodding my head. Yeah, we're in a very similar position. Having our executive leaders, really make those bold statements, and setting the objectives. What is our end target? What's our end goal? I think it's really important that we have what is that long-term objective, and as we build our programs, we don't have everything figured out how we're going to get there along the way, but we are putting signposts along the way. So we do have short-term objectives. And so I think both what Sebastian and David had pointed out, we're not trying to do everything, but we are focusing on certain core objectives. We've made a commitment, and we're right now doing all the different pieces. What do we want to achieve for science-based targets? We've got some milestones that we're going to be creating for a multi-year plan, and we're going to build our way to get there. And so I think the other part that's really important for us, we kind of geek out on the data, so we also build the baseline. Where are we at our starting point? And as we're making our way along the journey, we want to show what is that progress, not only for us as a company, but also for our shareholders, our stakeholders, as well as the communities that we work in, because that's going to be important. Did we get to the points that we wanted to be along the way, and did we get to our end goal? So I think it's important to have that type of path, at least kind of, pointing directionally. And I think the other piece is, along with our leadership, allowing the flexibility for people to participate, and they can either participate in those large goals, and as David and Sebastian pointed out, there's a lot of other things. People can also work on some of the other sustainability initiatives, and it allows them the freedom to be able to do that. So I think having that open environment to do that, as well as at least a directional path and goal, is key for us.
And I mean, David, you briefly mentioned it there about engaging people, identifying people's roles, and letting people know what you're doing. And there must be just such varying degrees of people's understanding of these issues, both within the organisation and outside the organisation. So that there must be, as part of that, a massive big comms plan in terms of what is it we're trying to achieve, trying to understand those issues and the implications of some of our actions on those.
Totally, and I think the one thing that how can I put it? I continue to remind myself of is not to assume. Don't assume that if you talk about whatever it happens to be, sustainability, environmental targets, about Scope 3 emissions for CO2, whatever. My experience so far has been that because most people, how can I put it, are predisposed towards being making a positive impact in this area, invariably they don't want to sort of show a level of, how can I put it, unawareness, ignorance, lack of understanding, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I usually find it quite helpful to sort of take it from the point of view of saying, let me share with you my understanding of what I think this means, and then let's have a discussion to make sure it connects with how you see it. And by taking that less offensive approach, I think, less confrontational approach, I think you get people then engaging with you, because by taking it in a way that doesn't start off by saying, do you know all about this subject? Invariably, the answer you'll get back is, yes, of course do. Yes. Right. And then you've got this blind panic of, I said yes, but I'm sitting here thinking, I really don't know actually, and I'm sitting here holding on by my fingertips as to this subject area. And so I recognize that, I mean, the hours and hours of research that I put into this, and they probably clock over sort of 100,000, whatever, I don't know. But, the reality is that we have to then recognize that nobody can sort of know everything about this subject, because it's just, and so it goes back to every day as a school day, even for me and Sebastian and all the others. I'm sorry, I'm just going to put it out there, but the reality is that if we start to socialize this discussion and the ideas and the way in which we're going to embrace this and move it forward, I think we stand a chance. But I think if we start working on the basis of saying everybody assumes let's start here, I think we're just going to leave a lot of people behind. And I think that would be a really sort of serious misdemeanor on our part. So I think what we have to do is we have to bring everybody with us. But interestingly, when you look at the new legislation coming out with the Modern Day Slavery Act and the new requirements for 2021, you look at the German Supply Chain Act, you look at all sorts of other things that are coming out at the moment. And the underlying themes are about saying you must communicate and educate the people in your organization that have the touch points and the connectivity within the supply chain to make the changes that are necessary. So there's a recognition that there is an obligation across the spectrum for everyone to take the time and the effort to do that, not just the communication, but do it in such a way, rather than it's a superficial exercise, it becomes one of actually engaging people and actually getting them to take that journey for themselves in terms of the understanding of what's required and what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And create the environment whereby people feel it's how can I put it, safe to ask questions, because that's hugely important that they can do that. And then because of that empowerment, they start to learn, they start to become part of the journey. And I just feel that is so important in terms of creating the correct culture. I mean, Sebastian talked about it earlier, creating that culture in the organization that said it's safe and it's okay to ask questions, even if you think, oh, sorry, but I think this is a silly question. No, it's not. There's no silly questions. Ask the questions. Let's talk about it. and let's get a common understanding of what we mean about something, because this is hugely diverse subject that has huge implications for us. And the more we do to embrace that and socialize it across our networks and our professional connections across the organization, the better place we will be to make an impact. And so
absolutely, yeah,
it's about environment and culture.
Sebastian, I mean, not only is it a big elephant, it's also an ever-moving beast as well. Like, you know, how do you manage suppliers or stakeholders with such varying degrees of understanding and capability in this subject? And how do you keep up to date with everything that is changing, whether it's legislation or new developments, etc.? So how do you take people on that journey with you?
So to a certain extent, I don't. And it might sound a bit provocative, because I'm a firm believer that this is a movement. We are still in a situation where, yes, there is legislation which is coming out there, but legislation is only forcing those who have not taken any action so far. Because most companies who have already embarked on a sustainability journey, that legislation is not a problem. It's basically forcing those laggards to start moving. That being said, what I really try to do is I try to inspire people by my motivation of why I'm doing this. I'm trying to inspire people as to why it is important. The commitment that I made to my kids, to myself, that I want to leave the world in a better place than I've got it. That is a firm commitment which drives me to inspire others. The moment that I start telling people what to do, that's when it's going to get more complicated. Now, at a certain point in time, to the point legislation will force us and will have to do it. But I think the companies who have already embarked on this journey actually can play a role of inspiration on this topic. And they can actually raise the awareness, whether it's internally with your stakeholders, about the choices that they make, how sustainable are they, as well as externally onto them on your suppliers. And actually, if you draw the parallel to your personal life, it's very similar. I mean, we've always talked about energy consumption, for example, of our home appliances. And what did they start doing? They start putting letters on the appliances when you buy them, whether it's an A, B, C, or D, raising your awareness about the choice you're about to make. The same thing that they're now doing with food, whereby they're putting a letter A, B, or C, depending on how healthy the food is that you're buying. Again, what they are doing is actually raising awareness. And that's what we need to do as well as procurement professionals. We need to raise the awareness of why we should do it. And that's both for the stakeholders as well as for the suppliers, but also why we do it. And again, I take the example of a supplier. There is value for a supplier to become more sustainable. And that is going to take him much further. So rather than telling him, you need to do it because legislation or because this is what I want as an organization, you need to actually drive the discussion differently and say, this is, you need to do it because of what's in it for you and how it will make you feel in the end of the day.
No, absolutely. And I think, Chris, I think if you can get over that message that, you know, sustainability just makes good business sense, and you know, it brings competitive advantage. It provides savings, like you said. What, you know, why wouldn't you have electrical items that have a lower output, etc., and turn lights off when you leave buildings, etc. So I guess those conversations with suppliers about motivations must be quite a critical path, would you say?
Yeah, and I think, you know, what's already been mentioned, you know, a lot of, you know, that kind of services during your communications, and, you know, even that education and alignment. You know, we do find, you know, corporate stances, you know, not only ours as well as our suppliers and our customers. Everybody's at different pages, different levels of maturity, different stages of readiness. So I think that's some of the other things that, you know, we take into account with our planning as well. Not everybody is ready to turn on a dime. You know, some organizations don't have that luxury to be able to get the momentum to get that change, and, you know, to provide and support it, you know, in a wholesale nature. So, as we have those discussions, those are things that we try to, to take into account as well. And for the ones that, are ready to engage, have that level of maturity, that also is part of, how do we get to, those various signposts faster or quicker, where are the areas where we can, kind of do those quick wins, gain the momentum, and then hopefully pull and draw the others along as well. And so, yeah, to Sebastian's point, inspiration is definitely a thing. And I think being able to showcase that with, partners that are strong and ready to kind of blaze that path, that's some of the things that, we also look for as well.
And what about collaboration, internally and externally? I mean, some of these issues are just too big to tackle on your own, and I guess we need to start looking about what people can do as a sector to pull together. So it may even be collaborating with competitors on some of these issues. Is that something you're seeing, Chris?
Yeah, actually, we just had that discussion this week. So, I have a new supplier diversity director that just joined. And, one of the things that we were talking about, as we look at supplier diversity, there really isn't competition. There's really more collaboration. It's a common objective to, strengthen areas in, that particular area. And I think we're starting to see that, also span across other areas. As we look at sustainability, we were really focused on our own facilities and, being able to move to more of a carbon neutral footprint. As we started doing investments and looking at, tapping into and, working with various power brokers to, kind of purchase, power capacity. We ended up funding solar farms with some of our competitors to power, our data centers. So it is already happening that, we are working and having to collaborate, with our competitors, even just to help, push and, drive some of the same objectives. And, it's a win-win for everybody.
Sebastian, are you doing similar initiatives, collaborating? Oh, hang on. I think we've lost your sound a second. Hang on.
Okay, should be
there.
back.
We are. We've got you.
So we've got lots of collaborations going both within our sector as well as outside of our sector, and I think it's really important because I think it's a common theme across our companies and across industries, and I think there's a lot that we can do together. Some of them will work. I think they're certain to the point which was made earlier already. It's a bit counterintuitive because in certain sectors, sustainability can give you a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
But working with competitors can actually be a bit counterintuitive. But again, I think the underlying factor is about what you will get out of it and and how each of the companies who are participating into this collaboration are actually using it. Secondly, I mean, beyond trying to push the needle, I think it's a source of inspiration for us as well. We all have our biases and we're all limited in our thinking. And I feel that when you connect with other people across industry or within your own industry, it's actually a very rich experience to actually learn from each other what they are doing, what you could be doing, because there's no such thing as not wanting to steal with pride, like we say.
Yeah.
There's no copyright or intellectual property associated to this. I think we all strive for the same common goal, which is not to create a competitive advantage for our organization, but to create an impact on the environment and the communities in which we operate. Now, if it gives us a competitive advantage along the way, I think that's only a plus, but that should not in and itself be a driver to do so. So again, here collaboration can actually just amplify, it can act as a catalyst to have a greater impact across the organization. And again, to the previous question that you've asked around how do you work with your suppliers, I think here again, if you join forces and the suppliers are hearing the same message from different people, and it will just reinforce the message and it will act as a catalyst for change.
Absolutely. I think if it as a group of competitors, you're all likely to be fishing in the same pond in terms of your supply base. If you're all giving that same consistent message about what's expected and what you're aiming for, and that's got to be a positive. David, have you seen much in the way of collaboration going on?
Absolutely, and I think it's quite interesting that certainly from my point of view, I mean, as a catalyst for collaboration, you'd actually say, well, you know, we all faced into the pandemic, but actually, you know, whilst I was Group CPO at Rolls-Royce up until the last few months, we were doing lots and lots of collaboration with other organisations in terms of PPE, sustainability agenda, all those kind of things. So, I think you know, people recognise that there is I'll call it a bigger benefit to be had from a societal point of view, and that's ultimately, in a sense, in our interests as a population. So we should recognise that actually by collaborating, rather than you know, being competitive or combative or confrontational, we will probably certainly achieve a huge amount more. And so from my point of view, and again, when you recognise as a profession and as business has migrated more and more towards recognising that co-creation, collaboration, and more sort of collegiate type activity is actually in our interest, and is not a sign of how can I put it, giving an advantage to the, in inverted commas, the competition that we will naturally have within markets. But actually, to Sebastian's point, the ability then to take an idea from one place, adapt it, and then transfer it into somewhere else and make impact, surely has to be the way forward. And if you think about all the things that we've done over the centuries in terms of, you know, adapting what we've discovered, invented, created, that for us has provided us with the ability to be a, how can I put it, a civilized society that's moved things forward. So why should we treat this era any different? You know, I think we just have to recognise that it is quite a natural, how can I put it, natural activity to take place, and therefore we shouldn't see it as being the wrong thing to do. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And I think, to some of the words that we used earlier, it's not counterintuitive. It's absolutely the correct way to take things forward, and how we adapt and leverage those things will be up to us, you know, as individuals in each organization. But the important thing is to take the, how can I put it, the knowledge and use that knowledge to create insights that makes the difference, and that's hugely important.
Excellent, thanks for that. Chris, you talked briefly earlier about science-based goals and targets, etc. How do you go around setting goals and measuring success, and do you link that back to corporate goals?
Yeah, as far as, you know, as we roll out the programs, you know, the various ESG programs, there's always kind of an end game, and with that there are, you know, goals and targets. You know, a lot of the, again, going back to Sebastian's earlier point, we really focus on some very key programs, and for those, you know, those do get reviewed and presented to our executive committee. So it's all of the leaders that report to our co-CEOs. So there's a review and endorsement of that. Some even actually go to our board as well for endorsement. And so there's a top-down understanding of what the objectives are. And then as we roll out the programs, you know, we measure against those, and those are being reported, and those are, you know, an ongoing thing that, you know, go back to the executive committee or even back to the board. So we maintain that, you know, it's an objective all the way across to the highest levels. So for us, that's very important, especially for things like science-based targets, that there is a common understanding, and it becomes part of, you know, the DNA of, you know, what they're looking at as far as some of our corporate opportunities and some of our corporate objectives.
Sebastian, what about measurement and reporting on success at UCB?
So it's actually very easy for us in that sense that we have basically 4 large measurements that we use, or 4 large objectives that we use throughout our journey. And we want to create value for patients, we want to create value for people, value for the planet, and value for our shareholders. And so value for the planet has been clearly defined with KPIs behind it. So it's about achieving our carbon neutrality and respecting our science-based targets. It's about reducing our waste. It's about reducing our water consumption. And so we have clear KPIs behind that. The same thing for value for people that we want to create, whereby again we have clear measurements around diversity, equity, and inclusion included into that. And the same thing for value for our patients, because there as well we want to create access for patients worldwide, which is again one of the 17 ESG metrics that we use as United Nations. So we really have taken those and translated into what we have as corporate ambitions. And therefore, we have then translated that into yearly objectives of how do we measure our progress towards that, so that we know that we are on track to deliver on those commitments by the expected dates that we have committed externally. And that's also what we do. And we've created this accountability partner, which is everybody externally. So we openly communicated about it on our websites. We have it in our annual report, so that not only we have an ambition, but we communicate our ambition so that we can be held accountable by people around the world for the ambition that we've embarked on.
Excellent. David, and you know, I don't know if you're seeing if more and more procurement teams are actually being measured themselves on targets such as these, and you know, whether that's driving changes and behavior and culture, you know, moving away from not just having savings targets to really drive that culture through in the teams. Is that something you're seeing?
Absolutely. I'd even go as far as to say, certainly from my point of view, I certainly made it part of the objectives of each individual, and then talked about sort of the contribution that they would make. And so therefore, by understanding the explicit contribution that they can make, you know, how they will co-collaborate with others to make things happen, but also driving that sense of you know, the whole team getting behind something and delivering something, rather than it just sits on one individual's shoulders, is hugely important. So I think it's connecting all of these things and not making them a silo. It's about bringing all of that together right the way across the organization, you know, across the teams, individuals, programs, you know, what the organization is trying to deliver. And it's about just making sure we've woven that golden thread right the way through all of those things. Because by doing that interconnectedness will result in impact. I'm convinced of that. And so the fact that then everybody is aware of it, they understand it, they understand also how their actions then contribute towards delivering the bigger objectives. And back to what we were saying earlier about some of these things are quite big, but actually by pooling those resources, either in terms of human capital or other, you can then recognize how you can see that you can move the dial. But I think it's also hugely important as well to ensure that there is a mechanism for playing back to the community, in a sense, that's part of that, and saying, this is the progress that we've made, this is how we've made it, these are the things that worked, these are the things that we could have done slightly better on, you know, these are the things that are more challenging, these are the things we have to take a slightly different approach to, you know. So that whole engagement piece, again, is hugely important, because people become motivated by that. So the importance of this, in a sense, is by continuing reinforcing that sort of motivation through the teams and through individuals is hugely important. And I think that leadership have a huge role to play in making sure that happens. Absolutely.
Don't forget, everybody, to start getting your questions in if you've got any to the panel. I've had a few come through to me. Somebody has asked a question. I was going to ask you, Sebastian. I mean, we talked about some of these issues being really complex, and there must be lots of interconnectivity between them. And how do you unpick that, and how do you make sure that you're not having unintended consequences of trying to solve one thing and having an impact on other? So I think that some issues are really interconnected. Wouldn't you agree?
I think David has already alluded to that earlier in the call as well. I think one of the things to start is understanding what the intent is behind an initiative, and understand how initiatives connect to bigger goals. I mean, to the point which was, I think the example that David gave was around fuel consumption, for example. And if you roll out a new mobility plan, what will then be the impact, for example, on your carbon emission? And how does that improve? And it's understanding, I mean, really laying out each program and understanding what is the outcome or the intent behind the program, and then being able to connect that to the big goals. I think that's the only way that you can have it. But that being said, it's okay. Let's not overthink this either. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes, as long as we fail fast and we take corrective actions. I mean, very rarely is anything that we do around sustainability a matter of life or death in the short term. So many of the decisions that we make can be overturned. So let's not try to overthink it either and overthink the complexities that it might bring, but let's just get going.
Yes, like you said, put your stake in the ground. And actually, when we spoke a few weeks ago, and it kind of resonated with me, and you said it's not okay to just talk about sustainability. We've got to talk about going further than that. We can't stay at the position we're in now.
What I always said is that actually I don't like the word sustainability, because I don't want to sustain what we have. Like I said before, I want to improve. So we should actually aim for improvability rather than sustainability, and really take it a step further and make that commitment that we want to improve, not just sustain.
Absolutely. Chris, do you think people's goals are bold enough? Are we going far enough in terms of looking at sustainability rather than, or should we be looking at more improvability? What are your thoughts there?
Sebastian, I'm going to steal that and bring that back.
I know, I love that. I've been telling everyone about that one.
Yeah, actually, I'm still stuck thinking on Sebastian's comment. I mean, that is, truly reflective of, I think we've been focused on things maybe a little bit differently, and I'm taking away just from Sebastian to bring that back. I think we really need to, as we're kind of leading these programs, that helps change the mindset and drive the inspiration. So sorry, I forgot your question, because I was still thinking improvability, just it's stuck in my head. So thank you, Sebastian, for that.
David, do you think people's plans are bold enough?
The simple answer to that is no. I suppose in a sense what we have to think about is that we have to create more of a, I'll call it an enduring sort of future ecosystem that is certainly not based upon what custom and practice of today. And so that's where we're trying to get to. And I think, like I say to many people, the bottom line is, sitting where we are today, the option to do nothing is not an option. It's actually the last thing that we can't even afford to put on the list, frankly. And that moving the dial has to be almost something that everybody accepts that they have a part to play in, no matter where they sit within that, whole populace. That everybody has a part to play. And there's so many initiatives, and I think sometimes again, back to this sort of co-creation, thinking about sort of the way in which we can connect many of these ideas so that it actually resonates and makes sense for people. and brings it into focus, a focus that they can understand and interpret in their own way.
Yeah,
are hugely important things. And the recognition, certainly from my point of view, is that push the boundaries, push it to the point whereby you can push it no further, type of thing. Because I don't think that we can afford what I call incremental change here. This has to be step change, and I think that's the difference. And so therefore it does, by its own nature, demand a step change. So it has to be bold. It cannot afford to be timid. It has to be a boldness about it. And I think for me, I think the sadness is that many countries are having to legislate to do this sort of stuff.
yeah.
I think to Sebastian's earlier point. But if that's what we've got to do, then that's what we've got to do. But I'm hoping that as soon as we can start to show people that are, how can I put it, are not the sort of I'll call it the ambassadors and the positive advocates that start to see the material changes that will be across the planet, then I think that we will then start to begin to turn the tide back. And I think it's like most change programs. It's a big change program, globally. The soon as people then start to see things happen, from those that are leading the vanguard to those that are the early adopters to those that are, I'll call it the passive adopters, you then start to get this whole movement. Then when suddenly there becomes an inflection point where then it really does gain some momentum, and it is no different to any other big change curve that you've ever plotted on the graph ever, because that's where we're at. We're at the sort of the global change curve.
Yeah.
And this is the one that we have to push the hardest.
Absolutely. And I think legislation is great, and it drives people from a compliance point of view. It doesn't necessarily encourage people to do the very best that they can, and I think that's something. It's that balance between good governance and just doing the very best that you can. We're about out of time. Thank you so much to everybody for your points today. I thought that was great, and some great messages to finish on there as well. And I think for me the takeaway is really getting that buy-in, sorting out that governance at the beginning, like you said, David, like forming a plan, making sure you realize who is involved and who you need to bring on that journey with you, keeping people involved with the comms, etc. Like you said, Sebastian, be bold, put your stake in the ground, think bigger, that improvability rather than just sustainability. And yes, I think Chris, you mentioned steal ideas with pride as well. So real collaborate there. So thank you very much. That was really great. I hope everyone's enjoyed this session. Like I said, we've recorded this session so you can watch it back. You can share it with your colleagues, and also we'll be sending information in the chat on how you can join part 2 of our Workday seminars as well. So there's more information there that's just come up there. So don't forget to join and register there. David, Chris, Sebastian, thank you very much for your time. That was such a great session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.